Day. Hi,
Hi.
Kate.
Good
We made
morning.
it work. Good morning. We made it work. So I just realized that this episode is our 16th interview, interviewing artists for Art News. And this is part of an ongoing conversation Art News has started with, awesome, young talent, seasoned talent, just creators, fashion designers, really trying to just introduce our community, if they haven't been already, to people really making change, influencing our culture. And you are definitely one of those people. So Kate Pincus-Whitney, everyone, welcome.
Hello.
Hello. So first, I just want to tee it up by saying, so you are a graduate of the Rhode Island School of Design painting program, and you have your first solo show on display right now in the Chelsea Gallery of Fredericks and Freiser. So that is awesome for anyone. I'm jealous who's in New York, right? Well, I'm not jealous that you're in New York, but I'm jealous you get to go see this exhibit of all of Kate's work. So for those of you who are, joining this conversation, Kate, let's just talk about where you're from and about your upbringing, and when in the journey did expressing yourself artistically happen?
Um, okay.
I know.
I know, right? Exactly. I'm like, oh. I was born in Santa Monica. At 1.5, my family moved up to Santa Barbara, where my parents split up, and so I spent most of my time with my mom, raised in the kitchen. Came from a very creative family. My mom is an artist, and so I grew up very much like underneath her art studio table. And when I first came to making, I think it really happened because, so I also like preface, I'm very dyslexic and very stereo blind, so I don't see depth. And so my relationship with storytelling and the visual world has always been one in the visual language. So like that started from when I was really little. Like I understood stories and things through image versus through the written word. And so I think that that's really like a foundation for just like my way of understanding the world around me. And then I think that the time that I really like came to making work in a serious way was when my grandma passed when I was 16. She, all of a sudden, I realized I trying to deal with everything. I was like, oh, how do I capture the essence of somebody that I've lost and that I love? And how do I think through these things? And of course, that came really naturally into a like more so in a portraiture way. So I turned to making work to deal with those things.
Wow. There's so much that you just said. And I think it's really interesting how being dyslexic almost forced you in a way to lean into a communication style or in such a
I think that
profound
for me,
way. Um,
it's like always like when it's interesting, even like when you look at someone who's like you look at a normal brain, when you're reading something, the visual cortex is going crazy. But with somebody with dyslexia, there's no activity in the visual cortex. So it's like there's actually this whole thing where it's like, oh, I started to really become attuned to the visual world around me because that's the way that I understand things.
it's so interesting. And there's so much I want to ask, but I guess so for people, we can get glimpses, although you're a little pixelated, but we can get glimpses of, there's so much color behind you. You're in your studio in Los Angeles. How would you describe your work to someone who hadn't seen it before, was coming in for the first time?
I think that something that you see immediately, I think people are like, oh, it's still life. Oh, it's colorful. It's boisterous. It's filled with objects. It's this theater of the dinner table. But the way that I relate to my work really more so is I think of it more so as narrative portraiture. I think of each piece as, in a way, looking at the cosmology of object identity and the way in which we relate to the material world. So it's like, for example, you will see a reoccurring motif and theme in my work, which is like you'll see a Lillet bottle. Now, now that Lillet bottle, it's not just an object. It's not just a form that I'm painting. It's not just a way that I'm filling space. Like when I have that in my piece, it's my grandmother. And I think it's like, for me, it's diving into the way in which we express or understand ourselves psychologically, emotionally, physically through the objects that we surround ourselves with.
Kate and I both chuckled there because when we chatted yesterday, I explained to her that the Lillet bottle was something that resonated for me based on my upbringing. It reminded me of my family, and we share that. And I love that it was a reference point to your grandmother. It just, and I'm sure people will relate to your paintings. You know, they'll find other objects that resonate with their own experience. So let's talk about that tablescape, because so much of your work and so much of the feast in the Neon Jungle, which is your solo exhibit at the gallery right now, is dedicated to this idea of tablescape and what's on the table. So let's talk about these themes and again, why are they so important to you?
Yeah, I think that, well, like I said, growing up, I was raised in the kitchen, grandmother. Like that's the way that we understood our identity. And I think that that was something that was really important, like anything from going on like sacred pilgrimages to the local like Maxi Chiosco store, going to the Italian market, going to these different places. Like that for me has always been the way in which I've both shared my identity and also like understood and interpolated my identity within the world around. And so I think that for me, when it comes to the tablescape, like it's really is, when I say it's the theater of the dinner table, it's the theater of the dinner table. And so you have all of these object actors. Also, it's like, it's a way for me to tell these personal stories, but also transcend the personal to more of a collective or the collective unconscious, where it's like I can communicate and imbue something with meaning. And then for you, you then have the ability to have these different associations or relationships with those other objects and relics. So it's like for example, the Saint-Jacques, like thinking about the way in which like memories of walking down La Rue de Chercherie, you know, but it's you know, it's the way in which there's this idea in neuropsychology where there are these two different modes of perceiving. One is called allocentric and one is called autocentric. Now, when you're on autocentric, it's the way in which we are typically engaging with the world, right? It's like, oh, I'm eating soup, it's hot. But allocentric, you take this time to slow down and you taste the specificity. So I think for me, when it comes to the tablescapes, it's anything from taking the mythology of Hecate, Demeter, Persephone, and putting that into the way in which I have a relationship with them, and then bringing in the way in, like, ritually divining things and having conversations with them. So like, wow. Also the tablescape, it's also like, who doesn't have a relationship in some way, shape, or form with food? We all have to eat. And like it's so intertwined with our emotional selves, our psychological selves, sustenance, love, loss. It's like when I think about the tablescape and growing up, it's like everything happened around the table. Heartbreak, death, love, rebirth, you know? It's one of those things that it just feels really, it's my truth, I guess. And I think that it's one of those things that, like, with the work, I hope that the viewer is invited in to participate in those ways, where it's like when someone comes over to offer somebody something to eat, it's this love exchange.
Your work resonates so much with my own experience. And I have to just say, you know, I think that during this pandemic, everyone is sort of reevaluating their relationship to cooking, nourishing, healing, soothing. And so I feel your work has an even greater sense of just I mean, I'm not saying it's not relevant, but it feels incredibly relevant at this time to sort of consider the dining room table.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, and I wanted to, I'm glad I put this up and we can put up some others up. Your work is so detailed and it feels like every inch of real estate on the canvas is so brilliantly planned. Can you talk about the process of mapping out a piece, kind of start to finish? Just take us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the piece that you have up right now is the Theater of the Dinner Table, Dining with Hecate. So for me, the piece, like ideation wise, I had just finished a series of work called Persephone's Garden. I had been dealing with assault and resilience and all of these things and trying to think through all of that. And I actually ended up coming to a much deeper place and making these somewhat like shrine-like spaces. So Hecate is the one who lit the way and helped Demeter find Persephone when she was taken, right? So that was like the context of the threshold I will go through into the painting. Typically paintings will start with an idea, a phrase, words that I've ever heard, poems that I'm gleaning, things like that. Then when I actually start diving into the process, a lot of it, one of the other things, my mom used to do this thing with called a sand tray. She used to do play therapy and dream work. So I grew up basically surrounded with like thousands of little objects, and all of those objects have meaning. So for me, I really do think of this space, the canvas, almost as a sand tray to tap into the collective unconscious. So I'll take these different objects. So something like Hecate, who's also like very much associated with like the divine feminine, it's paired with sea urchins, which for me is a symbol of my home. And also Linda Naucklin's Why Are There No Female Artists? You know, like, so it's that combination. So, but it's funny because when it comes to the actual starting, and you can kind of see behind me, I know you said I'm a bit pixelated, but like.
Oh no, you're back. You're back. You're clear now.
Or also these pieces behind me, the way in which I start. So I'll have that idea as my like framework. Then when I start working, like then the conjuring and the magic and the divining start happening. And so I actually will literally physically write words and phrases and things as the first layer of meaning that I am able to put into the piece. And then I start abstracting them. And I have this very physical, very dynamic, intense relationship with it. Then I start placing objects. And it's funny because I don't do drawings. Like I have a drawing practice, but that's not my painting practice. Like I'll start by drawing and actually like laying it out on the literal canvas, because I think for me, there's something really intense about and like magical about the immediate dialogue that you start having with a piece and responding intensely from this color to that color. Oh, this lettuce leaf. Oh, this sea urchin. Oh, this and that. And I think there's that whole other aspect of like what is able to just come through. That's like me setting my ego aside in the studio and tapping into that other space where it's like once I have all the objects and things that I'm thinking about, then allowing the piece to come together.
Is there music on in the background? Are there other people in the room? Is it classical? Is it heavy metal?
Definitely not heavy metal, but basically everything else besides that. I listen to a lot of Ethiopian jazz. I listen to, Billie Holiday is constantly on in my studio. And I do feel like that's all a part of the alchemy of things coming together. There's always music playing. I'm drinking like 17 cups of tea. I'm like in this other space. And then also it's like, then I'll like, except for now with the pandemic and everything, but like usually then I'll like also like when I'm walking around a supermarket, I'll see like this amazing packaging and I'm like, this somehow has to be in here. And I think that, and then the weirdest part is that I'll end up being able to trace back these lineages or these histories with these particular objects that actually end up being a part of the larger narrative of each piece.
It's so fascinating. Honestly, I would pay to watch a video of you abstracting the word, like starting with the word and blowing that out. I think that is like just that concept alone is so fascinating. Okay, wait, I'm trying to, oh, wait, hold on. I was trying to get another picture up. So let's move on. So we've got this I mean, there's so much, such an incredible, and I'm very drawn to your color palette. I love how full of life and energetic and vibrant. It's so refreshing, especially during this time. I feel like who couldn't use a little bright color in their life? Why do you think the color palette is signature to your aesthetic? And do you have a favorite color, or why are there certain colors you kind of always go back to that you feel define the work? Or are they always evolving?
I think that they are always evolving. I think it's part of like the dialogue that I'm having with the work, but also like growing up in a household with a grandmother who was like a chef and a mother who collects millions of cookbooks. Like, I think a lot of it also comes from like really crazy, intense, like 1950s bizarro, like vintage cookbooks. So there's like that radiation. I think also, like, as you can see, like I surround myself with very colorful things, but I think also part of it, the color. So when I enter my palette, it is, I'll set it up in a very like particular ritualistic way. And then by the end of it, it is all just everything everywhere, very intense. And I think that it's part of that dialogue. But I will say, I also look at people like Pierre Bonnard and the way his color resonates. I love the Nabi and the Fauvists and the symbolists and the way in which his colors resonate to a different type of truth of the thing and the experience. And I think something that you'll also see like in the works too, the moments where you have these like particular intense glows, and like that's what makes me like, if you can see the show and like go see the show in person, because the work is totally different, because you'll see these little slivers of like the cosmic mush that are the words that glow that are glowing beneath the thing, that are almost like backlighting it. So I think that that type of light and color and liveliness, I mean, there's also like, you can get into the total academic side of it, but like for me, I think that there's also something that needs to be accessible, that draws you in, that pulls you in. That's like, when it comes to the color, it's like, that's what I live for.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, listen, the experience of seeing artwork in the flesh
Yeah.
cannot be virtually replaced. That being said, I'm grateful we have these tools to even get a glimpse into your studio. But let's actually talk about your exhibit, your solo exhibit at Frederick and Fraser Gallery.
Yeah.
In Chelsea. So because I think one of the things you and I touched upon yesterday that I thought was fascinating is just this concept of how the work is physically hung up in the space, and sort of how much input do you have into that process, and why do you do what you do, or why do you want it to be experienced in that way? So maybe talk us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was funny because it came from a question originally that was like, what is a piece that captures the essence? And it's like, oh, no, it's the whole thing. It's a gestalt, like the experience.
Right.
And I think that like when you enter the space, and like, thank you to Andy and Jessica, Andy Fraser and Jessica Fredericks, because they were able to actually help, because I wasn't able to be there physically to hang the show because of the pandemic, which was a really crazy and upsetting thing. But they were they were able to come up with this brilliant plan of, I am such a deeply maximalist person, and it really is important to me that you feel this intense generosity of spirit and intense generosity of the gooey, ooey yumminess of these things. So it's like you enter into the first room, and it almost feels as if, I mean, for me, it feels as if you're entering into this like very sacred space where there's breath between us in a really like poetic way. Then you enter into the back room, and it's everything. And it's like, I feel like for me, my work is this continual dialogue with each other, that each piece holds this power, that it relates, that it's communicating with the others, that for me, like it's a gestalt. It's the whole, it's larger than the sum of its parts. And so I think that that piece, working with them, they absolutely understand and are so fluent and like I don't know, so fluent in the work itself too, that they felt and understood how it needed to be displayed, which is funny because I used to get in trouble for wanting to put everything up, the kitchen sink. That's just like who I've always been. And it's funny because I feel like, especially like as a female artist, as a someone who works in color and things like that, like there's definitely a long feminist history and sexist history against things in this maximalist style, pattern and decoration, etc. And that's also a part of the lineage that I'm like, let's go.
I love it. I love your maximalist spirit, and I love that the gallery partnered with you in that way to let you realize this vision. And I love that you're a participant in this experience, because I don't think I've ever considered that an artist figures out or helps partner in that process of where the work is placed.
Totally.
So that's really an interesting takeaway. Let's talk about just well, we've really talked about your mom and your grandmother and other artists. Are there any other sources of inspiration? I mean, I love that the grocery store made its way into the list.
Oh, like absolutely. Okay, so when it comes to inspiration, I have a joke. It's like anything from Federico Fellini to actual fettuccine is welcome in the studio, because I think that that's something that, like, for the way in which I understand the world, it's a way of looking and experiencing the world and being open to all the things. So like what I mean by that is like something like I've been lucky. Traveling is a huge part of my practice. It was something that like my mom and I did a lot, but it's also something that I find like super important. So the moment that I get to a different country or get to a different place, the first place I go is the market, because I want to see the specificity and experience and smell and tap into the specificity of place. So it's like anything from, I'm also like totally creepy and take like a bajillion pictures constantly of like strangers and things like that. And so it's anything from like the way in which people are hand painted signs in Buenos Aires, that like that makes its way into my painting in the same breath that, let's say, Matisse's anemone flowers will make its way into the painting. So I think it's really important to me, and I think it goes along with the whole like everything but the kitchen sink kind of situation, but really being active in investigating and questioning the world around me and allowing for not a non-hierarchical way of high art, low art, all of these things. Instead, it's like, okay, let's bring in like night studio. Let's bring in the fresh sweet peas that are at the market. Let's bring in all of these things, because it's all the detritus of life, and it's the way we understand ourselves. And so I think for me, it's like, of course, I can like name off my like artistic family tree of like thinking about, I'm having a fight right now with Picasso over, I'm picking a bone with a bone plate that he made, right? That's coming in there. But also the fact that like I have friends who are fishermen who are working daily and this is their livelihood, and to be able to have dialogues and conversations with them and bring it into the entire cosmology, I think it's really, really phenomenal. And so like that for me, it's like, even in a time right now, like when we were stuck inside and like literally my partner and I, we like got kicked out of our studios when the pandemic opened. We threw up these literally faux walls and just started making work. And it's, it's like, it's all of those things. It's allowed Maya Angelou to come in and have a conversation with Clint while there's a can of, it's all of those things. So I think that that's kind of, actually, there's a Giacometti quote that I absolutely love. It's okay that I read it, because I think it's something that I'm like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I mean.
This is yes.
So he said, all the art of the past, every age, every civilization, arise before me, everything simultaneous, as if space were taking the place of time. And so for me, that's definitely a way that I think about daily life, everything that I then bring into the studio, and then honor it by giving it that different way of consciously relating to it.
I can only imagine what your dreams look like. And I have to say, you're so receptive to your, I think that one of your gifts, it seems, you're so open. You're so open to everything. And that's such a gift. So that I commend you for that. And I also have to just tell everyone here, which I learned yesterday, you have a mean sense of humor. And I think that's part of what is so fun about the work is you're playful, even in some of the titles. I'm sorry, but I still can't get over, you can call me on my shell phone. I loved that. Oh, I need to get out more, Kate.
No, don't we all? Don't we all? I feel like a studio monster. I've just been in this space doing this entire time. No, absolutely.
Your studio looks fantastic. And I actually, speaking of that, because we've got a few more minutes. You moved to California. You were just saying that you and your partner, you threw up these walls because you left your space in Rhode Island and you were trying to figure out a solution. And then you decided, let's go to the West Coast, and you now have your studio here in California. Yes. So let's talk about this new workspace for you. What has that done for you? Has it changed the process at all?
This new space, so we moved in a week ago, which is crazy.
Wow.
But all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I have more than 8 feet on a wall to work on. I have an actual, this is my space. It's incredible, but also already just tapping back to being in California, the light, the specificity of the light here, the color, all of it. I'm just so excited to be working. So I think there are some really, really exciting things to come, and I think you should stay tuned because...
Oh, yes, we should. We absolutely will. I'm sure everyone who's listening right now is very grateful to have tuned in. I would say the other thing I'd like to just ask you, you've done so much, and I think so many artists out there are trying to figure out how to get seen or how to, what advice would you give kind of working artists, especially during this pandemic?
I think that the only advice I can say is it sounds so cliche, but work from the heart, work with what you've got, make work that you believe in, fight for what you believe in, and then also understand that you have the potential. I think that's the most magic aspect about being a creative person is you can think of something and collaborate with material and create something that has never existed before. And I think there's immense power and possibility in that. So just keep going.
It's so great. It's such great advice. So I think that's everything. Is there anything you'd like to say? I want to encourage everybody, again, shameless plugging of Kate's solo show, which is on display now through, I believe, March 13th in Chelsea at the Fredericks and Freiser Gallery. Yeah. You must check this out. And Kate, any parting, there's so many more things we want to know about you, but just love having you here on Art News.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you also, obviously, to Andy and Jessica at the gallery. Thank you to you, Brooke. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for everybody who's been listening. I'm excited to talk more. So give me a call on my cell phone.
On her cell phone. All right. Have a great week, Kate. Thanks so much. We can't wait to see what you do next.
You too. Thank you so much. Have a great one.
Okay.